Welcome back to Defying Gentrification. This is a podcast where we defy gentrification, number one. It's hosted by myself, Kristen Jeffers, and beyond just thinking about gentrification and all its tentacles, we also touch on all aspects of land back, land use, community, transportation, etc. And this week we have our first guest, Derek Moore. We're going to have a really wide-ranging conversation about really urbanism in the South and Atlanta and Baltimore and changes. Good stuff. So definitely stay tuned for that. And before we get into the interview this week, I can't not do a hot topic, and this week's hot topic is definitely hot. It's about lack of grocery and lack of culturally competent grocery stores. So, as usual, I do my intro here, we take a little ad break, and then we get into our hot topic. So yes, take a break with me, and we'll be right back after I pay a couple bills. Bookshop.org is my primary sponsor right now. I'm an affiliate, and it's a wonderful place to go buy books if you don't want to support that website that starts with an A. I am constantly adding to the collection of books that are available on bookshop.org, and usually I like to highlight a couple books that come up in the conversation. So yeah, definitely stay tuned to the other two ad breaks in the show where I recommend two books in particular that are very relevant to our conversation today. And so if you want to find my part of bookshop.org, of course, you can just go to bookshop.org. There's a lot of great bookstores there, a lot of great people to support. But if you want to support this platform and me, bookshop.org/shop/Kristen E. Jeffers. That's KristenEJeffers. And now let's get into our hot topic. Welcome back to Defying Gentrification. I'm your host, Kristen Jeffers, and this week for our hot topic, I decided to record this. I'm literally sitting in the bowels in a parking deck in one of the few Harris Teeter groceries that is actually in the District of Columbia. And this store, for me, is one of these stores that seems to think that it can move away from me. And that's why I thought this would be a great place to start this week's hot topic. This week's hot topic is about the WAMU article about the folks in Chinatown, D.C., who have to go to the grocery store in Virginia. Well, yes, there it is. This Harris Teeter that I'm sitting at that's accessible via bus line. There's another Harris Teeter that's on the other direction in the district. There's a Safeway that they can walk to that's still technically kind of in the Mount Vernon Triangle, Chinatown area. However, a lot of things that are specific to Chinese cuisine, a lot of fruits and vegetables are unaffordable. And many of the folks who still live in Chinatown, D.C. are on fixed incomes, Social Security, family members helping them with funding. And so, yes, this article in WAMU details how they have a special bus that comes and picks up everyone, and they drive them to Falls Church. Falls Church is home to a lovely complex called Eden Center that's really centered on Vietnamese businesses, as well as a number of Asian groceries, H Mart being one of them, and then some other smaller independent grocers, produce vendors, meat vendors, etc. For context, this isn't like they're just driving across the bridge. So if you know DC geography, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you don't know DC geography, basically Chinatown, DC is about a block from the White House. It's definitely not far from the Potomac River. On a good day, it would be about like a 30 minute walk, depending on like what angle you're approaching Chinatown. Chinatown is the center of Chinatown is definitely where the arch, we do have a friendship arch, and we do have businesses, mostly kind of corporate-y, stock exchange, and some maybe private businesses that aren't Chinese owned. And they all have like the symbols. So like you have like one good example, we have a Chick-fil-A in Chinatown, D.C., and it has the lettering on it that says Chick-fil-A in Chinese, supposedly. This is definitely one of those cases where, yes, there's letters, there's a friendship arch, there's a metro station, and yes, our hockey and basketball arena, which will be staying there. Those of you who may have been following D.C. Building politics may know that arena was almost abandoned, and it was the big story from around the Christmas holidays through really just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, when Virginia relented to let that team move to Virginia, and DC gave an incentive package for that stadium to stay. But of course, this isn't necessarily about the stadium, but let's think about it. Where the people have to go to the grocery store, or where they are bused to, that is past where that stadium would be. That stadium was going to be a waterfront stadium. This is still, you get on to our highway, and it's a good 30-minute drive if you're driving by yourself. And so the bus that the article highlights is a private bus that's arranged by some of the organizations that are helping the Chinese communities that's still living there in Chinatown have as good of experience as they can. And there is, before y'all come after me, there is a metro bus that comes and picks them up but that bus is easily an hour and a half. Have you ever tried to carry your frozen foods anywhere for an hour and a half? This is why, in theory, you're supposed to, in urban neighborhoods, at least have a corner store that has fresh fruits and vegetables and your frozen goods that's right down the block, so that you can walk or even just roll maybe a wagon if walking with things, or you can't carry weight, or you can roll. You can at least roll into these stores. Of course, New York still has this. New York still has, obviously, the bodega style corner stores, what we would call convenience stores down south, your 7-Eleven type stores and other places besides New York. I know there's 7-Eleven in New York, but it's more private, like individuals own those stores. And then same with even the full service grocery stores, that's more individualized. You don't have as many chains. Even New York-based Wegmans isn't as much of a presence in like Manhattan and Brooklyn. It's there. I know there's one in Brooklyn now, but it's less of a thing. Well, here in DC, what we have set up is we pretty much have all chain grocers. We have a lot of 7-Elevens. We have a handful of sort of the private corner, what we also call them corner stores, corner, convenience, bodega type stores owned by individual people. Chinatown, D.C., of course, used to have more Chinese residents, and they used to actually have a grocery store that spoke to the needs and the Chinese cuisine, as well as to the prices that were available. However, that has changed. And in that changing, now these folks are food deserts. This is a food desert for them. Like, they go to Safeway, but they may not be able to afford it. And we've already had at least one Harris Teeter's closed in the district. CVS's are closing. You go into some giant Safeways, either the food is expensive or it's not all of the food of a certain cuisine. And yes, now the Safeway that's closest to my block has like gates up and makes you scan your receipts. And yes, we know people are taking things out of the store, but we are also in a crisis where people don't have enough food assistance. When we ended the pandemic emergency, and even prior to ending the pandemic emergency in the United States, some jurisdictions are already releasing the increased food aid that was given to people, while the expectation was that everybody stays home. People might have lost jobs with stores other non-essential stores being closed. Of course, we know the grocery stores were essential, and we were clapping for grocery workers back then. Now here we are in this state of affairs with this. And so, yes, this is why I wanted to make this my hot topic. I will include this link to this WAMU article in the show notes. I will also note that WAMU, this is the kind of coverage we do want from you. Yes, this is a sad story, but sometimes we do need sad stories because these sad stories will provide solutions, bearing witness to the things that we need as communities of color, even when they're sad, is what we need in order to grow as people and as earthlings. So, yeah, we can have the happy stories, but sometimes we do need to bear witness to things like Chinese people in the neighborhood not losing this piece. And yes, even in a world of Orientalism and exoticism, day to day, the actual living of people is not necessarily guaranteed. We are happy here in DC to just have a Chinatown with letters, an arch, and one residence and only of people who can really afford it, and some community members taking their legacy family properties and trying to cash in on the global economy, but not taking care of their own people. So that is my hot topic for this week. Yes, I didn't spend as much time on the hot topic this week because, yes, we are about to have a wonderful, wonderful conversation with Derek Moore about Baltimore and Atlanta and being Black kids, Black queer kids and adults going through gentrification. And yes, as I promised, they are going to challenge me a little bit on some things that I've said and perceptions I've had. And of course, I'll come back at the end of our conversation and talk about something that I did as a result of recording this conversation a few weeks ago. With that, I'm going to do what I normally do. I got some books for you in the intermediate segment, so listen up. And then after that, we will be back with our interview. This is Defying Gentrification with Kristen Jeffers. We'll be back. So if you want to really get ready for our next part of the podcast, I have quite the book for you over at bookshop.org. Yeah, bookshop, as I told you earlier in the podcast, where I have my store and where you can support me. It's over at bookshop.org/shop/Kristen E. Jeffers. And yeah, I spell my name KristenEjeffers. And so I wanted to highlight a book that talks about the suburbanization of Baltimore as it started way back in the 1800s. Yeah, in the 1880s. It is called Not in My Neighborhood, and it really does lay out that suburbanization is not new. Segregation was definitely not new. And as I mentioned in our last episode, that Baltimore was the lead in a lot of these residential issues. So go and read it, download it over at bookshop.org, support this show, and get ready for the rest of our talk, or just hang out, and we'll be in our interview part next. All right, y'all. Welcome back to the Defying Gentrification podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Kristen Jeffers. And as I have been promising for the last couple of episodes, we will be having guests, and we have a guest this week to talk about their experiences with gentrification and the various things. So, Derek Moore, why don't you tell folks who you are? And of course, get us started, like just in general, maybe get us started with childhood experiences, or if you want to rant about how gentrification has bothered you today, that's also great. But just in general, let's get us started and tell the folks why you decided to come on the Defying Gentrification podcast and tell your gentrification story.
All right. Yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is Derek Moore. I am a Baltimore resident, but I'm an Army brat. So I grew up mainly along the East Coast, but I don't claim just one state. I kind of see myself as, American, all the states, claiming them all.
Yes.
So I moved to Baltimore 4 years ago from Brooklyn, New York. And before that, Atlanta. And then before that, Sacramento, California. So did a little bit of traveling post, graduating high school, being in college, where I went to Georgia Southern University in Statesboro, Georgia, the armpit of Georgia, as I affectionately like to call it. About 45 minutes from Savannah to the east. So a very interesting place to be, to just soak up Black history and just a lot of interesting things that are happening down there. So I met Kristen fatefully at a birthday celebration for another friend and fellow transit enthusiast and
the
advocate.
incomparable Jerome Horn, who
Yes.
has been on my original podcast. And yes, I am asking Jerome to come on this podcast among other people. But Jerome said, interview Derek first. They've got the story that we need to hear first. I'm just me. I'm like, okay, Mr. I'm just kidding, Jerome. But I
am deeply humbled by that.
But I want to go back to talking about Georgia Southern. So I love Savannah. Like,
it's
Savannah,
a beautiful city.
It really is a beautiful city, and it was so interesting. The last time I was in Savannah was for the CNU in, I believe it was 2018.
Okay.
And I was on the panel and I was on the stage in like a lot of these spaces. And this is why there's been gaps in like me doing these kinds of programmings, because when I would make them in the past, I would have to represent everybody. And so I was in a situation where I had to represent Black. You know, I wasn't out to the work. Well, at least I wasn't out to like people outside of DC yet. So a lot of my professional community did not know I was queer. I didn't really hone into being non-binary until a little bit later. Thank you, pandemic. But like, who knows? And then of course we were on this stage representing the not the gentrification, but you could say it was a gentrification,
right?
Because it was generations with a white boomer male, straight, white, straight, Midwestern, Gen Xer, male, like, you know, and me, very femme presenting, very Southern Black, you know, and woman's one of the genders, so I'll still say woman, and just that energy's there. That's what I'm perceived as. And the thing is, like, when I'm like around my Black family, like, I don't have that trouble with like absorbing those roles. But definitely Savannah was very comforting. The tree cover, they tell you that you can't have urbanism with trees. Savannah proves that wrong.
Yeah.
And it really does. And I like it. And I also wanted to highlight, you know, my cousin's actually working down there at Georgia Southern.
Loves nice.
It. Yeah, loves it. Has been in student affairs. And I think it's Georgia Southern. They'll listen to this and correct me. But yeah, they're at a university in that region that I believe is Georgia Southern, and they love it. And they've been doing their doctorate at UGA. So yeah, they've been doing that drive. They've been doing that drive.
It's a brutal drive.
Yes, and coming.
Yeah, I avoided doing internships in Atlanta just because I did not want to do that drive.
That was a wild drive, because what I ended up doing was, the friend who was picking me up to drive me down lived in Chattanooga.
Oh,
they they drove from Chattanooga, picked me up at the airport in Atlanta, that wonderful urbanist mall of an airport that's connected to MARTA. So, you know, if MARTA could just go all the way to Savannah and it just feed you down the road, or if Amtrak could connect you properly.
If Greyhound, you know, there's not even a Greyhound station in Statesboro. And I'm like, that's the market where students would want to make that connection. But, you know, what do I know? You know?
And so, you know how it is and of course, those who've driven on the coastlines.
Yep.
And you notice the trees are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And then if you do have a clear cut, this is another place where you can see clear across the land. But depending on where you are, you're not seeing beachfront. You're seeing the swamp.
Yeah, I always tell people Savannah, you know, I guess people, when they haven't been there, they think it's on the coast, like a beach city, but no, it's like more of a inland river city.
Yes.
And Tybee Island is the beach. And that's where you go, you know, well, you can go not all year round, but it's pretty warm most of the year. So
just like right now, why is it 84 degrees and thunderstorms? And then it looks like it's still 84 degrees because the day we're recording this, it's April 15th. Of course, my taxes are like bothering me. And of course, that is a storm in my head, and it's a storm outside.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. I was like, gosh, like that region in the South like calms me in such a way. But it's it is still the South.
Yeah.
And one of those things is like, that's probably why it took me so long to kind of embrace this concept of gentrification, because one of the things we notice in the South is it seems like it's unlimited land.
Hmm.
uh Gentrification's racial element looks different. We had other things that have happened. In a future episode, I will talk about this pipeline, or
Hmm.
depending on when this airs, I've either already talked about urban renewal to gentrification, at least sort of the state side.
Yeah.
But then here you go, and you get into this urban planning profession, and people are talking about gentrification, and all of a sudden you notice that they're asking you about it more often. But your connection, like, at least you were an army brat, and you had lived in other
Yep.
cities, and you lived on installations, and you
Yeah.
lived in like towns and compounds and seen these different type of urbanisms.
Yeah. It's been an interesting life, a journey, let me say.
Yeah, but yeah,
But
there's the resource. But I do
yeah.
want the listeners to understand, like, for me, it was like, okay, why is gentrification, why is it so bad? Don't we
Mhm.
want things? Because we've been trapped on the campus, and there's only a few things on this campus. And then, I'm avoiding Atlanta, and people are like, well, Atlanta's what it is, but there's still opportunities. And then
Yeah.
when you talk to somebody who said they moved to Atlanta, and then you ask them really hard, and you find out it's Marietta, or it's Morrow, or it's Stone Mountain, or
That's
it's
real. Yeah. I
Lithonia.
feel like when I moved there, it was right after so I graduated. I walked across
Yes.
the stage. I had two graduations. I walked across the stage and then I finished my credits. So those were two
Yeah.
separate events.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but after I walked across the stage in May of 2014, I started AmeriCorps,
Mm-hmm.
NCCC, which is National Civilian Community Corps, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
kind of like structured like Peace Corps, but it's in the
Mm-hmm.
United States. So you get deployed to a part of the country. I was deployed to Sacramento, California. So we were part of the Western region, which is my first time being on the West Coast. Let me tell you, when I got that letter, and I was like, I didn't know where I was post graduation or what I was doing right before. Man, I was so happy. I was like, well, that's it. Like life moving to California, like going from Georgia to California. Um, and in that program, they pay for your place to stay and all your
Mm-hmm.
food.
Mm-hmm.
And being in that age group of being chronically broke, uh,
Yes.
it was also its own blessing. But
Mm-hmm.
so that really shaped how I like experienced cities at a younger age, being supported by this kind of paid internship type situation. And Sacramento is a weird transit city. Like it does have a couple rail lines, but I mean, all of us who were like the program's geared to like 18 to 24-year olds. So like everybody's in that age group of, being more scrappy. So
Yes.
so we use the transit system, although like now I'm like, that was kind of inconvenient. Like I don't think I would have walked 20 minutes just to get to the train station to get downtown now. But then we were like, yeah, let's do it. 20 minutes, it's a train. And we all moved from like different parts of the country as well, right? So we were experiencing city together. And when we may have moved from a place that didn't even have bus service, right? Or if it
Mm-hmm.
did, it came like once a day or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Columbus, where my family moved to, well, where they decided to settle, I guess, eventually.
Yes.
Um, it's the third largest. No, now it's the second largest city in Georgia, and it only has a bus system that runs like once every hour, if that. And my parents lived near their first house that they were fortunate enough that they were able to build both of the houses that they owned. So I'm always very, glad to walk on the shoulders of my parents who worked really hard and grew up in rural poverty, mind you. Like
Mm-hmm.
they grew up, rural Mississippi and rural, well, a couple different places because, I got a father, stepfather,
Yeah.
black families. Yeah, let's go.
Yay.
So, but just having all of those influences, bringing it into my adult life, living in California at that, coming from Statesboro to Sacramento, was that eye-opening like urbanism experience for me. And then also, the most pivotal part of that was my first semester of my senior year in 2014. my car that I had since I was 17 at that point. So from like 21 to 17, I had a car. That was a hand me down car, but it came in handy. I took care of it. It just went out on me. Like lost the car completely. I was about to graduate. Like you live in like Southeast Georgia, you need a car. Like
No
it's not
question.
remotely an option that you're not having a car living there. And I hadn't experienced anything like, not having a car since then. Both my parents always owned cars. Since they were in the army, they could get their car problems fixed sooner, right? If something happened to the car, they were able to fix it. So I never had to go without a car until this moment, really. And that was like, you know what? Like maybe I should find a place where I don't need a car to get by, right? And then that California experience happened right after that. So I had some like I guess like fateful moments that kind of led me into like urbanism light, right? Had like urbanism with
Yes.
training wheels on.
No,
uh,
and I want to let me pause you there because that's there's a lot of overlap with my story. Like for me, it was my parents would not get me a car until I graduated from NC State. So I
mm,
graduated from NC State a semester early in December of 2007. I
mhm.
started in the fall of 2004. Like I was so driven, everything clearly 3.5 years. And probably part of it was like, okay, well maybe my life will start after this. Now I loved
Mhm.
being on campus because we had campus bus system. Where our campus is so big because we're one of the flagships. So we
Mhm.
had and not only did we have our campus bus system, the Wolf Line, we
Mhm.
also had now this was predates the era that Target was on Hillsborough Street, like our main drag, but we had a Kmart still,
Oh,
and the
nice.
Wolf Line would take you to the Kmart, and the Wolf Line would take you to Bojangles and Cookout. Like that's it. And outside of the dining halls, Chick-fil-A was on campus, Taco Bell was on campus.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Ooh, I don't
yes.
think I would have survived freshman year with the Taco Bell on the campus.
Well, honestly, that was the thing because we had and that's it, just like we had so many things self-contained.
Mhm.
I could walk to Harris Teeter like a few blocks
Oh, wow.
away, or I could get on the bus and Food Line was right there. And
Mm.
of course, for the young folks who can't fathom the fact that there was no food delivery, like easy food delivery, like you were getting like Domino's, Papa John's, or one of those little things. Some of
Mhm.
those little places own like the main
Right,
little college drag would
right,
deliver because they knew, one, there was another kid like driving and that was their job, and
right.
two, that was everything was there, and then you were on meal plan and all those things.
Mhm.
Everything's so self-contained, but
That's
it's still
interesting. Yeah, as a Georgia Southern, like I feel like as opposed to more campuses that I'm noticing, like we're
mm-hmm,
very integrated into the town of Statesboro. So
mm-hmm,
like Georgia Southern was about like 20,000, and it
yeah,
was in town, but
yeah,
like more not quite like in the center,
yes,
but like off to the side.
yeah, we were
But
off to the side too. We off to the side.
yeah, so but students lived in Statesboro, like they rented houses because it was
Mm-hmm.
affordable, the
Yep.
South. So it was affordable to rent
Then
houses in the town. And so people integrated into the town, and I feel like that made the now transit wasn't any better for that reason, sadly. Our transit system, they had like a couple little buses that would go around, but like it would be like you might as well just walk, really. Like
no, because we had, well, the thing is, like, NC State has its core campus and
hmm
its core boundaries, and that's where most of the undergraduate campus was in the mid-aughts.
hmm
Like, the state of North Carolina magically got a whole other parcel. Our governor is also an alum of the school and really is proud of it. And so they had this excess parcel. Some of it is now Dix Park, where Dreamville happens. Another part of it became what's called the Centennial Campus. Now, when
hmm
I was an undergrad, it was mainly just going to be like a baby Research Triangle Park, specifically for the Raleigh community, because
uh-huh.
the original park was built to be like the resource for all of the main three schools. That's why it's called the Research Triangle or the Triangle, because of the schools. The
Right.
schools are the points of the triangle.
hmm
But basically, the schools also like to compete with each other.
hmm
So now there's like this whole, because of course there's two food lines that service campus, and one of those food lines is by the other Centennial, and Centennial has like this fancy like golf course and the chancellor lives out there now, and there's like a dorm there. There's a second bell tower because, of course, our tradition is lighting it red, as many people learned during this whole March Madness. We light our bell tower red. There were actually probably 2 celebrations. The old one got promoted in the core campus, and the old campus where the chancellor used to live, and there's other things. But there's literally so much land asset of this university. Literally, NC State could be taken out of Raleigh, or they could de-annex everything kind of west of downtown on that end. That's the other weird thing about Raleigh. Raleigh's downtown literally is down. It is the bottom of the city.
Yeah, I actually went to Raleigh a couple of last month actually, and went downtown. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, and once you get and then you got Raleigh Union Station, and you probably rode through. If you took the train,
we walked. I walked by because transit nerd. I was like, what's going on in this Amtrak station?
And
down
see, that Union Station wasn't existing. It was a different one. It was not the functionality.
They have a little Urban Outfitters down there, like a couple little restaurants. I'm like, oh, okay,
that was not the Raleigh now. That was building because everybody was sitting there coding in their dorms, and since they were providing us so many dorms, and they had built us our own little technology campus, and the engineering school was over there, and I did do some work in the comms departments of the engineering schools. All of that is there. And then, of course, my uncle has a pretty big role in working with manufacturing and helping manufacturers stay intact. And that's actually through the university. So there's all these things. We have this whole self-contained university, and in having that self-contained university, it's a city within a city. And so you're sheltered. And so, you don't really have to leave. Leaving is optional. And yes, there's an ecosystem. And yes, we used to be able to use our student ID cards and get on Raleigh Transit, but we really didn't need to leave. So I definitely relate to that culture shock, and I definitely didn't exactly need the vehicle, but I was having to get rides to Walmart because Walmart was still kind of outside of the range. So it's definitely befriending people who had vehicles for the Walmart run. Target was kind of just out there, and the Target at the time, I think they've reopened it, but they basically shut one Target down and reopened another. And it's on the black side of town because Target seems to be allergic to us as well. And of course now Target's right there on campus, replaced our little classic bowling alley. It's just so weird to watch this city within a city evolve, and you're at your young years, and that to me was my exposure to urbanism. But it was also interesting to talk about your first few years out of college, because for me, my first few years was my, okay, maybe I don't want to depend on a car. I had moved from campus to an apartment complex that was just east of the boundaries of the legal RTP. And in 2008, it was not legal to build housing inside of the actual legalized triangle. It was just the Sheraton, Research Triangle Park, restaurants. I think somehow there's a Walmart on the edge, but everything's on the edge. And so apartment buildings, they had started to sort of build those quasi gardens where they're a box. They're trying to make you think it's like a city building, but there's still the breezeway's still there like it is in the South. The parking lot's still there. There's no connectivity. They're just popping up. They're still gardens because they're little garden complexes, clusters with no connectivity. You're still dealing with the original terrain of the roads. You're dealing with rural areas, and they're all spread out. Or I'm going to South Point Mall, and there's a collection of things there, super Targets there, but I have to get in the car. And thankfully I had it, but I felt like I had moved the world away because I-40 at rush hour and I-4 and 540 pre and post toll, and then we didn't have the 85 connector yet. We didn't have, and then of course the saga of getting regional rail and the triangle.
Yeah.
And so if I had stayed in school through my full semester, the plan was that my senior semester, spring semester, I was supposed to have been able to walk out of my dorm and our light rail was going to be right there at the stop. Like,
Oh,
so there was this anticipation. And
yeah.
for a lot of people, not a lot of people realize, because of course it's been years since I've really dug up the full lore of like how I got into this.
Uh-huh.
That was me. I was waiting for this train to come. And then Amtrak was already coming through the campus right by the dorm. Like
Mhm.
there's been several times I've lived right next to the train tracks. And I think
Yeah.
part of it has been like, okay, this is urbanism, living next to the train. Never mind my
Yeah,
house
it
is
is.
rattling.
Yeah.
And then of course I to fast forward, well, I do want to talk about Atlanta, but I do want to also put in the universe that even in Baltimore City, I lived underneath the tunnel. I lived underneath the tunnel there too.
Oh wow. I actually
I
live on top of the old B&P tunnel. Like my house is directly on top of it. And sometimes in like late at night or really early in the morning, I'll hear a train whistle. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's right underneath me. Yeah, like I
no,
just
I lived under the active tunnel that they're replacing,
right, okay.
and at 4:30 in the morning,
Hmm.
like clockwork,
You can
till 9:30 at night, because
ooh,
well, and as you've seen, the upper end, that's why when we were at the birthday party, we got in the car because we weren't sure like what all of y'all's plans were. We
yeah.
thought we might have another bar in us, which we did not.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, it's so weird because you get introduced at a young age to urbanism, you
Hmm.
move around, and then you get into, well, I think this is a good time to talk about the Atlanta chapter because Atlanta is
Yeah,
a very interesting setup.
definitely. Yeah.
It's
So
a
I
very
moved.
interesting setup. So let's talk about Atlanta.
Yeah. So I moved there after living in Mexico for 4 months. I
Mhm.
did I those couple credits, my
Yes.
graduate my walk across the
Yes.
stage graduation and my credits graduation. So the credits
Yes.
graduation happened in the fall of 2015,
Mm-hmm.
and I got re-enrolled and got my whole degree like turned into like an online degree, so
Mm-hmm.
I could finish those last couple of credits online. I had to
Mm-hmm.
change majors, but by that point I was like, just give me the piece of paper and so I can
Yes.
get on with my
Yes.
life.
Yes.
But I was able to take classes, one with one of my favorite professors. Like she had started her tenure as an online professor
Mm-hmm.
for the sociology department, so I was lucky that I got to take a class with her.
Mm-hmm.
And then a couple other classes that were like these like about welfare studies and like just different classes that were actually really interesting, that I was like,
Mm-hmm.
where were y'all when I was in the school and wanted to take these interesting classes.
Yes.
But I enjoyed my time. I got connected to this website called workaway.com,
Mm-hmm.
and it's basically where you go somewhere, they pay for your place to stay and give you food, and you do
Mm-hmm.
tasks for them. So I
Yes.
got hooked up with this hostel in this town called Sayulita in West Mexico. It's near Puerto Vallarta. It's like a little
Mm-hmm.
city that's kind of a satellite to that. And yeah, just kind of stayed there for 3 months while I did those couple classes online. And Mexico was like urbanism without rail, that I was like, okay, so there's really no reason why we can't have this. But like Mexican people are super hardworking. They
Mm-hmm.
like they getting it done. They're gonna do what it takes to get to where they need to go.
Yeah.
And the frills, they're like, okay, we good. We don't really need all the frills. We get to where we need to go.
Mm-hmm.
So like the buses that you pay like a couple pesos for to get from Sayulita to Puerto Vallarta, like whipping through a jungle, and the bus was like this big. And yeah, it was interesting in that, like, I was like, well, it runs pretty often, people relied on it, like it worked. And
Mm-hmm.
then in the US, we Greyhound's like hanging on by a thread, right? Even though it's like confused, confusing why we have
I
to have.
mean, at least it's doing better than Megabus. Cause when I, for me, I had my car. I had that first Honda Accord from
Mhm.
2008 until 2015 when I moved to
Okay,
Kansas City. I drove it to Kansas City. So
nice.
my mom and aunt got a rental and followed me.
Hmm.
My cousin actually sat in the car with me.
Oh,
Yeah, that was just nice little bonding.
Yeah, a little family road trip.
Little family road trip because I needed that family with me because it was some questionable things that
I
I
mean that
saw.
yeah, that's a real southern route right there. You went from when that was North Carolina to there?
Yeah,
I
you go up through West Virginia, then you actually cross into Kansas City through Illinois, Indiana, and then
interest.
all the way across Missouri. You go through St. Louis, and so we stopped in St.
Uh-huh.
Louis on the Illinois side,
Yeah.
went to a subway, and I'm
Mhm.
getting excited. I'm like, I'm almost there. Yay, this is
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like crossing from Raleigh to Charlotte. No, 4 more hours
Mhm.
of desolation. And we had stopped the
Right.
night before in Louisville. We stayed in Louisville. We drove from Greensboro to Louisville through
Yeah.
Beckley. That was a stop. And of course, like that part of the trip was like beautiful.
Yeah.
Then I get out, then when the mountains go away, then when the rock formations go away and it's just flat, it was telling. And
Interest.
honestly, this was also the same summer that the whole situation with Sandra Bland happened. And of course,
Mhm.
thankfully I was not alone. But when
Mhm.
I was getting tired of Kansas City and I wanted to come back east, I did not feel like driving myself again. Now I had a friend who actually drove herself back to DC, but she had her cat at least. I
Yeah.
ain't have no kind of living creature
Oh,
to do
yeah.
this with. Everybody's like, we just got you to Kansas City. Why are you trying to move to DC? You know, we did this for you once and they have
Right.
paid for you. Why are you
Yeah.
quitting your job? Why are you doing all this? You know, gotta love black families of a
That's
certain age.
real. It's
That is
real.
real. And that's the thing, like it's
Mhm.
but what I was finding was the culture shocks.
Yeah.
And I think it sounded like adjusting to Sacramento and Mexico wasn't as much of a culture shock. And of course, those programs are
No.
great because you're like young
Yeah.
enough. You're not
Right.
having to scramble for food. They at least told you where to get somewhere to eat and stay. But of
Yep.
course, even though my it was on a nonprofit.
Mhm.
They were needing to diversify,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so the idea was like, okay, Kristen's the black urbanist. Maybe we could put her here. Magic will happen.
Mhm.
I don't think they had comprehended at one. They were going to have to move me cross country. I was building a brand here on the East Coast. Like my core people. I
Yeah.
also was already looking at DC. The partner I had at the time, he was DC based. And
Mhm.
all of my life was East Coast. And I was
Yeah.
like, okay, well, they're saying I have unlimited vacation and I have time. There was so many things I didn't know. So I was already adjusting to a new job, had to
Yeah.
shove stuff shift over. Stuff took weeks to get there. I had to live on an air bed and in a camp chair in my empty apartment. I didn't really know a whole lot of people there. I do have a cousin and his wife, and they're military, and so they
Mhm.
settled in Independence to be next to that VA, and so they
Yeah.
had their setup. They were set and they were happy, and they're on the retirement end of things,
Uh-huh.
military retirement at that, kind of like
Right.
your family where they just sat and chilling.
Right,
And
not a
I'm
care in the world.
not a care in the world. And of
Yeah.
course, like my cousin all her family's from like Topeka, and they've all moved to the Kansas City metro. But
Mhm.
it was just different. Like they were
Yeah.
definitely like there, and I did Thanksgiving there one year, but the rest of it, even though the urbanism in Kansas City was spectacular, like
Mhm.
just all you got to see once again, it was another case where there's trees and urbanism. Like there's
Yeah.
the grids, the numbered streets, this was streetcar opened a year, like I was there like literally like a month after streetcar was when I was like,
Oh,
okay,
nice.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I have all these wonderful stories about being on the first streetcar twice. Officially and unofficially,
Mhm.
because the mayor Sly James had never seen me before, and I think he just realized, okay, nobody here is gonna be black on here. Let me just pick her.
Right, let
Let
me
me
just
just
see
pick
what
her.
she's talking about. That's
And
how I felt.
everybody is like, how in the world did he do this? What was he not thinking? Like, because to be honest, our organization should have been on the first car anyway. Like
Mhm.
I had actually, part of the reason I was able at the VIP reception the night before is because we had done work on the marketing for the bike and ped, and then I got on the street. Then they were at the opening ceremony, and I can't remember if I had ridden. No, I had ridden my own bike downtown
Mhm.
that morning, and that the hill adjustment. So it was just a lot of, and then everybody's at work like, how did this happen? And then everybody's like, how did this happen? We get back to the office, they're like, wow, how did that happen? I'm like, well, how did we not? One, I'm on like a committee already. Like there was just so much. People were plugging me in already. It seemed like an optimal situation. And I'm wondering like if you've had that kind of situation where you've moved somewhere and because you're so interested in urbanism,
Mm-hmm.
people are trying to like get you to do like all the urbanism, but you're like, I'm just trying to live, you know, like it's fascinating. I'm just a fan. I'm just a
You know
fan.
what? I actually feel like I had a really graceful entrance to urbanism to the point that
Yes.
I'm at now. So, like
Yes.
moving to Atlanta after Mexico, I
Mm-hmm.
also had a family member that I was able to stay with for a couple of weeks till I
Mm-hmm.
found a
Mm-hmm.
place, and
Mm-hmm.
then found when Craigslist roommates were a thing. I feel like that's still kind of a thing, but
Yeah.
it was
They're,
definitely a thing in like
yeah.
2015, 2016.
Yeah.
So I found a roommate who lived in East Point, which
Mm-hmm.
is kind of in the realm of the airport city, like
Yes.
you said.
Yes.
But East Point is a cute little, it has its
Yes.
own little soft urbanism going on.
Yeah.
The friend
Yeah.
she like one of her coworkers, I guess like their grandparent or something, had this little cute 2-bedroom, 1-bath house with like a little kitchen and living room. It was nice. Like it was better than like a 2-bedroom apartment,
Yeah.
and it had a little backyard. You can walk to like a grocery store that was kind of like Piggly Wiggly, but it was like an off, not quite the
Yes.
same brand, but like the same
Yes.
style. You can walk to the MARTA, like the East Point MARTA, in like
Mm-hmm.
15 to 20 minutes, and there was like a
Yeah.
bus that took you there if you could catch it on time.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
was like the perfect like soft urbanism that was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like I'm renting here, but then the water bills came and the electricity bills. We were paying $1,000 a month just in utilities because apparently the city of East Point gets their water from like city of Atlanta, and so there's these like agreements of blah 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 blah. It's a
Yeah.
lot. I had to
A
get out of
lot.
there. 3 months I was out of there because I was looking for a job as well because after AmeriCorps I was still trying to like okay like I had this great urbanist or at that point for me it was community and economic development.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and so those and I was like okay I know I can find a job in that, but there's not like there's not a I didn't see anyone who was like doing this career path. So I was like making up a career path of interest
Mm-hmm.
based on community and economic development. And I was like, well, I guess I got this degree. Might as well put it to some use. And it just worked out that my major was communications. So like
Mm-hmm.
I just so happened to start school when social media was starting to become a
Yep.
thing and
Yep.
WordPress and all
Mm-hmm.
these things that like if you learn them early, were like,
You're
you know,
golden.
right. And yet got you jobs. So I was
Yes.
lucky enough to be able to like combine that communication skill with this budding communication. I mean, with community and economic
Mm-hmm.
development, understanding because my minor was sociology. So I did
Mm-hmm.
have a base of knowledge of understanding of social issues and their deep complexities, but also like why and be able to talk about that and
Mm-hmm.
and it had to be a strain of my work throughout, going through an AmeriCorps, through moving to New York after Atlanta. So while I was in Atlanta, I did another AmeriCorps program, which is called Vista, which is
Yeah.
volunteer
Mm-hmm.
service to America.
Yep,
It's
I'm
more
an ex Vista, even though I
okay.
left my Vista program. I because of that reason you're talking about knowing all the things.
Hmm.
See, I knew all the things. Like it's so cool that we're like, because I'm for the listeners, I'm learning things about Derek as we're talking. Because you were chopping it up, watching like and
Right,
hanging
right.
out at a birthday party, y'all.
Mhm.
But literally, most of y'all, if you've been following me for years, know that my 2 degrees are communication undergrad. Master's is actually APA with a community and economic development concentration,
Mhm.
which of course, when we're talking about this era of time in the 2008 to 2015, even through 2016 era, this was, yeah, if you knew how to do the things early. And when you
Mhm.
talk about doing the things early, because we had terabyte internet on the NC State's campus, they had us in English 101 building websites in Dreamweaver. So I know
Mhm.
Dreamweaver
Oh
as
wow.
well as Dreamweaver, Expression Engine, WordPress, Joomla, Drupal. Like I have done all of those things, but
Mhm.
my heart and passion, of course, is outside. And then, of
Right.
course, this was before, and even still, people keep trying to make you niche down. But I've always been interdisciplinary. And so
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, well, maybe I can help folks out, just telling them what to do. And so my Vista service, this was Vista service when you were supposed to be poor, like you could not
Mhm.
work. But the
Oh,
quirk
that
that,
was mine. They actually
yeah,
changed the rule while I was in it so that you can get a second job because they knew they were
good,
underpaying people.
good for y'all. Because the thing was, I would have stayed in Vista, but I had started this platform and
Mhm.
I had not, no, actually, I hadn't got paid for it yet, but I had the faith that it could pay me. And I'm
Right.
like, I had the faith that it could pay me. It wasn't actually paying me yet. Now, if I realized that, I would just write it out. I'm like, it's not
Yeah,
actually
I
paying
can't
me. It's not showing
believe
up on my taxes.
right. I can't believe that I like could afford to live in Atlanta at that time on a Vista salary. Like I can't even like my mind is not that's not possible now. Like, you wouldn't even be able to do that, you know.
And it's changed so rapidly.
Yeah, like
And
that. Like I
that's,
said, that was 2016 when I started the Vista
mm-hmm,
program, and I
mm-hmm,
did it at a organization called it was Service Works,
mm-hmm,
and so they had it was basically teaching that 18 to 24-year-old age range um, service project, like how to like
yep,
put on a service project in your
mm-hmm,
community in
yep,
order to gain like relevant work experience, in order to
mm-hmm,
gain like the skills that you got to have 5 years of experience and like
mm-hmm,
ABCD. If you can show you can put on a service project management, that was another one of those kind of like
yep,
job skill sets that like employers are looking for that you
mm-hmm,
can actually demonstrate if you are putting on service projects in your
mm-hmm,
neighborhood. So our Service Works online program was this like online kind of gamified program that taught that age group how to set up a service program in their neighborhood. So that was my Vista project. There were four of us there. All of us are black, and it was interesting because like going from NCCC, where it was like out of 300 people, there were
mm-hmm,
like 30 black people.
yep,
But I mean, also I am a staunch advocate of integration and
yes,
being a part of a larger community.
yeah,
Because while I am very also a staunch pro-black person, I know that being integrated into the world is critically important,
mm-hmm,
and not to push away influences that are different, right?
yeah,
And it being in that space of NCCC, and I mean, growing up in an army family, like I was always exposed to people who were not
different,
who didn't look like me, but
mm-hmm,
we were also exposed to people who did look like me,
yeah,
and we're able to form relationships, and also the challenging place of being black in a certain position, right?
yes,
So moving to Atlanta, I think was just a like explosion of all of those things because Georgia
yes,
Southern, like a lot of my friends from Georgia Southern came from Atlanta, right? Like they wanted
mm-hmm,
to get away, so they came to Georgia Southern.
yeah,
And so when I was ready to make that opposite move, they were at least there to help support
mm-hmm,
or hang out, or we would connect me to other people. So like I feel like that, and that was also the era right before like some of the more landmark stuff in Atlanta was getting torn down. So like I
mm-hmm,
lived right by where like on where Ponce City Market is
yeah,
on Glen Irish Drive. I literally
yeah,
lived on Glen Irish Drive in a house that was like it was a trap house pretty much. But like the guy who was the investor, developer, or whatever, basically like cut it up into like two apartments and then like rented out the rooms. So it was like six rooms in this like little house that was on the corner, where
yep,
around where these like, those modernist brick glass
mm-hmm,
$1 billion houses were like
yes,
just cropping up. Like they were like
yep,
in the infancy of being like, they were setting up the plots to get ready to
yeah,
build them.
yeah,
Because we could walk to Central Park, which
mm-hmm,
is right on, is that North Avenue, I think? Yeah, it's like
yeah,
right off of North Avenue. That's like where Atlanta starts to get like, that's the walkable, like
yep,
urban part of
yep,
Atlanta.
mm-hmm,
And like I said, I was really lucky to be able to afford to live there. If it wasn't for that trap house, that that like I wouldn't have been able to afford to live there on a Vista salary.
no, and it was so funny. I have a business story when I came down to training. And so we were in, was it that Georgian, I think it was the Georgian Terrace, which that building has had a lot of issues,
Hmm.
stories about, but that was our training spot. And of course, if
Hmm.
you're coming in from out of town, and it was, it was pretty decent. And so me being the urbanist of the group, we had gone down to the Krispy Kreme.
Oh, my favorite. I used to
Yes.
go to that one all the time on
Yes.
North Avenue.
Yeah, and we had gone down to the Krispy Kreme, and then somebody's phone was broke, and they're like, "Yeah, we need to go to the mall." But I'm like, "Well, it looks like we can just keep walking out the sidewalk." But I'm assuming this mall was like outside of the city limits. It's a
Oh.
mall,
Mm-hmm.
so they all vetoed me actually walking those 3 miles. But I'm like, "It's 3 miles." Like you were talking about,
It's
it's
just 3 miles,
just
you
a
know.
sidewalk. This is great.
You
Like
know
my
what?
first.
But I think that's when like the belt line was just starting to
Yeah.
become like more alive. So that East
Mm-hmm.
Coast, the East Side Trail had just opened up too when I moved there. So
Mm-hmm.
like I saw it go from like being like more on the emptier side to like
Yeah.
being packed where you can't even walk on it anymore. Like and where
Wow.
they tore down what they used to call, I think that one was the murder Kroger. That
Yes.
was right on that side where I saw it being like demolished and to be where they built on top of it. So they
Mm-hmm.
literally densified this area while I was living in it.
Mm-hmm.
And another kind of staple over there was the Masquerade, which was
Mm-hmm.
like, I think it was open since like the 80s, but like every
Yeah.
big act, I think Bjork performed there, like
See.
huge names performed at this little rickety venue that was like
Yeah.
right there. I love that place. I saw my first, I think Solange actually was the first
Nice.
artist I saw
Yes.
there. And yeah, it just had like its own little history that I could be like, oh, I see myself there because I, lived there at that time. And they demolished that to build an apartment building while I was there as well. I went to the literal like last festival they had before they
Yeah.
tore it down. So it was just crazy just to be able to see like this. Like I said, my family moved there in like 2005 or so. So
Mm-hmm.
like we being in Columbus, at least it's like an hour and a half away from
Yeah.
Atlanta. So we had
Yeah.
like a recreational relationship with
Mm-hmm.
Atlanta. Like it was a place we
Mm-hmm.
went for fun, for
Yes.
the
Yes.
city life, but then go back to Columbus for the suburb vibe that my
Yep.
parents so enjoy.
Yes.
um, and so, yeah, so my experience with that urbanism of like, whoa, like things are changing in ways that aren't very comfortable for me. I'm like living in the middle of trying to get my life together, right? And like I just graduated that year before. So like still trying to find a good job, knowing that community and economic development is kind of my jam, knowing that I want to be working in community development. Like all these things were starting to come forward as Atlanta was urbanizing, or densifying rather, within like a zone. So like where the belt line was being built, everything within that was like the new core, or is becoming the new core, which is very
Mm-hmm.
apparent now when you go there.
Yeah, and I
Um,
haven't been down. I haven't been in Atlanta since 18. And even
okay.
then, and I was more on
Mhm.
the West End. I was staying with folks more on the West End, but I could kind of see things were going. But I've kept up. I've seen pictures, and
Mhm.
even going to Raleigh again, like just that. And of course, people have been tapping me to talk about Southern gentrification because, of course, it wasn't even a word. It wasn't a
No.
word we
Yeah.
were, as we said at the top of the interview, it wasn't a word we were thinking about. But now, this is where the concern is rising. This is like the
Mhm.
moment of, this is why I'm really starting a thing called Defying Gentrification, because I'm like, okay, so where are we supposed to go? Like
Yeah.
many of
Ooh,
us, and yeah, and of course
yeah.
you are in the circle. You're definitely in the circle because
Yeah.
we tend to keep a tight circle of friendships that are
Definitely.
involved in these things and trying to work in these spaces. But for a
Yeah.
lot
So
of
like
people,
that house that I lived in doesn't exist anymore. It's like a 15-story apartment building. And like I couldn't even afford to live where I was even
yeah,
trying to live at that point. So like I guess that was my first real experience with like, oh wow, I guess I got pushed out almost, but was I even trying to stay? But could I even have afforded to stay? Like, right? Like and then that's when I just like, after that Vista year was over, I kind of had my fill of Atlanta at the time. But I didn't have a car. Like I was literally Marta, super hard
yep,
on it. Like,
yep,
yeah. And but Ubers also were super cheap in Atlanta. I always
yep,
I can get an
yes,
Uber from like like Pont City Market
yep,
to like Buckhead, like Lenox Mall, all that area.
yep, that
I
little,
can get
yep.
an Uber for like $6, $7 on a regular day, right?
Whew, yeah, yeah,
But that was back in 2016, the good old days.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
but
It's, yeah.
now, so moving to New York I moved to New York right after that. Just kind of, it wasn't, it felt like a whim at the time, but I needed to move to New York for like several reasons. And like turning 23, 24, like hitting that quarter life crisis. I was like, all right, if I don't do it now, like when else am I going to do it? And like I said, I had already had that career focus like starting. So I knew that, all right, community and economic development, I don't like, that's a thing. And also I forgot to mention I was doing, there were I think Georgia Tech might've done this. It was like this like urbanist training camps that they were trying to like do pop-ups around the city to kind of like inform about like urbanist topics. So I was trying to make it to as many of those as I could. So that was like a little taste of urbanism, of that like formal training of like, okay, this is like an actual field that I can see myself in and participate in because I'm doing it, I'm living it.
Yes.
So then moving to New York, I moved to Brooklyn. That was my first stop. Me and my friend, we actually he lived in New Orleans, and we both got a Greyhound. Like we both intended to use the Greyhound, and just so happened to buy the same ticket. So like when his started in New Orleans and it met when I was in Atlanta, so we were like sitting next to each other on this like epic journey, moving to New York from the South on the Greyhound.
Yes.
And also I had too much luggage, so I knew flying was not going to be cheap. So that was like I got that ticket on like a Black Friday sale for like $13. So I was like, this is like fate, I'm one of those.
Yeah,
I believe.
If everything was lining up, especially in this era,
right?
Things are getting expensive. So
exactly. So that Black Friday Greyhound special, like, thank you, in the past. But so I was able to kind of like move towards, where I feel like I've gotten to that point of urbanism where people are asking, now they're asking me about urbanism stuff. But before, I think moving to New York was really that like, okay, like I got to work. I had the privilege to work. I know working. People see that like, I don't want to work. That's not But I was able to work at the nation's first community development corporation called the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Corporation.
Yeah.
Also, the first Black-led, Black-owned, Black of the all of the president, the CEO, most of the board members. Like it was like this was kind of the like I told my mom this was the ideal job of being able to move from like doing AmeriCorps work to actually being in community development, kind of where it started. And what made it special is just that it was the community basically saying to like the federal government, like their states, their U.S. senator, like we need a concentrated funding and effort and support and bricks and mortar to rebuild Bed-Stuy in like the 60s. This is Shirley Chisholm. Like Shirley Chisholm was part of this. Like every Black leader of that 60s, 50s time was like part of building this institution that's still there. And so I got to be able to work in their communications and development department as their 50th anniversary was coming around. Nice. So that was just like, was just like, like, like this is it. Like, I really felt so connected to how much that means to Black people to be able to like really lead community development on a federal level in 60s Bed-Stuy or that history of Brooklyn in that time period was like how I think of Baltimore now, honestly.
Which is a good segue because of course you've crossed the country, we've done all these things, and of course as we're coming to the end of our little talk about your little gentrification diary, like coming from Brooklyn and being at like the CDC of CDCs. And one thing I really want to kind of impress on folks is like, that's where the urbanism happens in the Black community. It's the CDCs and the churches are generally pushing the CDCs. And then, yes, we have our urban leagues and Defying 9 and some of the other social groups that are putting themselves together. Urbanism for us is either happens to us, or if we're in control of urbanism, we're in these environments. We don't come at it like, if we're like a fan of like a train, or if we're like, oh, this is so fascinating, but this is our lives. And so I would love for you to talk about just that movement to Baltimore. And then, of course, maybe even end on just how you're seeing Baltimore being the central part of like what's next. I know when we were at the party, you were talking about being in West Baltimore and of course the history of that. And the opportunity and all of that. So just kind of tie us together talking about one, getting to Baltimore, and then your Baltimore years so far, because you've been there for 4 years, so it's sticking, and of course these are the pandemic years, but it's still sticking.
So I in 2019, so I actually went to this like minority and cannabis business seminar.
Nice.
And went to mainly hear the speakers. And there was this one guy who was there. Wish I could remember his name, but Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. It's a West Baltimore-based advocacy organization, and one of their leaders, he was speaking at this, and the way he was like this, he was just very eloquent speaker. He was so well spoken and just very like hitting all the points and like how Black people and minority people need to get in on cannabis industry right now. And so I, went up and talked to him afterwards and was, just mixing it up. And he was like, and I was like telling him, like, I was thinking about Baltimore. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. It just feels like a place that I just need to explore. And this is like 2019, mind you. And he was like, you know what? You need to explore Upton. Like, just think about Upton as a place. And so I was like, I will. So, at this time, like I said, I was still working at restoration. I was still, at that point, I had transitioned from like full time to a contract of working for the 2020 census. So my job was to do all that, was to work on the communication and the outreach plan for our neighbors in Bed-Stuy to get them to do the census.
Yes.
So when the pandemic happened, my job became even more important because that was how we were getting the word out for people to do the census and how important it is for us to do the census. So luckily, as the things were, June, the summertime was really when all the counting was ramping up. So by the time my lease ended in Brooklyn in June, I was able to keep that job online and transition to Baltimore after taking a visit after, this suggestion to go visit Upton. Yes. And I took the Amtrak and luckily those cheap pandemic tickets, like bring them back. But yeah, so I went there back on the same day and just like walked around. Like I probably walked like 40,000 miles that day. I mean, steps that day.
Look, it feels like it, but it's easy to do.
Right. And that already was the appeal to it. Right. And I met this guy actually off of a dating app, and he actually on a friendship basis. Like I'm one of those people on social networks that like it could go either way. We could be BFFs or but like so he happened to be a cool tour guide and a friend. He was a local, and literally just like we walked around all these places. We went to Upton. We walked on Pennsylvania Avenue, right to where the apartment that I ended up moving to, and I was like, reminds me of Brooklyn, honestly. Like I was like, this is literally like Broadway in Brooklyn, like right where the J line is. Like that was that was where I lived. I lived on Cooper Street, right where Broadway and Cooper meet in Bushwick, right on the border of Bed-Stuy and Bushwick. And if you've been to that area, well, you probably if you've been there pre-COVID right till now, like it's changed dramatically in like just the time that I've been aware of it. So I know people who've experienced it longer. But moving to Pennsylvania Avenue, for me, it was like, oh, well, duh. Like, it's like literally downtown. It's in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
It has transit. Like, you can walk nowhere the light rail. Like, the rent. So, the apartment that I found, that I learned later, was like subsidized affordable. Like, not Section 8, not any program, but just affordable, subsidized housing. And it was $7.75 a month, a free month of rent, and the security deposit was $10. So I was like, okay, I'm moving in there. Like, don't really care what else is going on. Like, I need this cheap apartment. And I knew I had applied for unemployment because I knew that contract was ending. So I had it long enough to be able to have my pay stubs, to move in. Yeah. But I was fortunate enough that, that time being in that apartment, I lived there for like a year and a half, helped me to save the money that I needed to be able to buy a house a couple blocks away. And just being able to have access to affordable housing that was intentionally like, like I said, not program-based affordable housing that was subsidized. Like, and then, later learning the history of Pennsylvania Avenue. One of my friends who now he lives in Mexico City, he sent me Wes Moore's book, which I forgot which one it was.
Is it the one, the other Westmore, where he's like
No,
following the
not that
person?
one. It was the one that was more like based around the Freddie Gray
That's,
protest.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so he sent me that book like right as I moved, maybe like the week I moved. So I like read that like, it took me like a day or two to finish that. And so I just was like really just like rooted very quickly, I feel like, to what I needed to be doing in Baltimore and what I was doing in New York and Brooklyn, but wanted to continue to do. So, like I said, I lived there for like a year and a half. The house that I ended up finding, like I said, I use a down payment assistance program because working at a
Which are a
nonprofit,
lot.
we don't get paid a lot.
No,
But I
no.
qualified. I qualified in that same level as like police officers, teachers. Like I qualified in that because I work at a nonprofit, and was just fortunate that I could find something that I could afford in the area. And the property taxes are like very manageable as well. They have programs to like keep it going up at a predictable percentage. Like it always goes up, but at least if you can predict the percentage it goes up,
Yeah.
makes it a little bit more manageable,
Yes.
So like just the journey to like I said, that affordable housing to home ownership was like, who's doing, like, where was that happening, right? Like it was so like, of course I had to research and pursue it, right? It didn't just fall in my lap. You like it just, oh yeah, it just happened, right? It did take a lot. Like I said, living in that apartment while it was affordable, you can imagine lots of, police tape and shootings and lots of really difficult things that living in an urban environment brings, which, like I said, moving from Brooklyn wasn't foreign to me, but it was just what it was, right? I mean, when I gave that 775, I was like, man, it's cheap, but I need to move it to this house as well.
And that's the one thing I want to emphasize. Like, I want folks to think about, especially our folks. And of course, this is the podcast where, like, now before the original podcast, I'm like, I'm gonna convince everybody to, but this one's for us and other folks of color to understand, just coming to these neighborhoods and when we're in our neighborhoods. Now, the thing I have is being perceived as feminine, as that extra level of, okay, I need to think about me walking around the streets, and I wish I could had that cheap affordability. Now, yes, not to say that women aren't in the streets, but the cat calling sometimes, and if you don't have the right people with you. But the one thing about Baltimore and this is, I'm getting ready to go back on my next, hopefully on my next Baltimore round. Like, we're between going to Virginia because my partner is a Virginian. It's like, yeah, Virginia's lit. And of course, Virginia has its history. And then coming back to Baltimore City, where I'm like, I have my friend core, and as an artist as well as a communicator, I'm looking at that Pennsylvania Avenue like arts district. The subway is there. Like, people don't realize, like, that subway is there. Maybe don't get no ideas. Like, stay scared. Please stay scared for a hot minute. But if you are a Black American, or even just Black of the diaspora, this is a wonderful opportunity. And I'm glad you brought up LBS, or Leaders of Beautiful Struggle. They've done a lot of good work with the arts district. And I remember when they were kind of getting started a little bit and figuring out what they wanted to do and figuring out where they needed to show up. And I've honestly watched them, and then collectively, like that collective, and then, Live Baltimore, giving you the resources. Now, of course, connecting people with some resources can be a little difficult, especially.
So I want to say that was Druid Heights CDC, which is also a Black-led and Black-governed nonprofit that is doing amazing work. I am very glad to count them as a partner, as I'm a worker for my neighborhood association. But like, just being able, like, 4 years in, I can say, like, I don't see myself moving. This is my home. I'm here. People know me. Like, I'm here.
And I think I was looking at and that's the thing. Like, I'm like, y'all stay scared, because I'm in MLS right now, and I'm looking at the housing, and I'm looking at the shape of the housing and comparative and our budget. And I'm like, and I need this so I can write everything off, because Maryland lets you write things off. And I think it's just, that's what I want, like that friendly feeling, because I'm Southern hands down. Like, I'm adjusting to. I eat more crabs now because people can't seem to fry the fish properly. But then
Yeah.
I'm like, how am I expecting them to know what popcorn shrimp is when I can't eat crabs inland? Like,
You
I
know
will
what's
not touch a crab inland.
Baltimore is the perfect blend between the north and the south.
Yes,
Like
it is.
if you've lived in both, you
Mm-hmm.
know what you
Mm-hmm.
can get here that blends. This is actually the first city where I feel like where I go to eat sushi and I know there's going to be real crab in the sushi. Like you
That
can get
part.
California rolls, with the imitation stuff, but you can also get fresh crab sushi
Mm-hmm.
rolls as well. And I
Yeah,
think that
and
there's just so much here that I think
yeah,
that that I see in that, like I said, that Atlanta that I literally saw, like, as
yeah,
sand in the hourglass going through my hands,
yeah,
seeing Atlanta change. That
yeah,
was a way that, like I said, the way I interacted with Atlanta was like priming me to see a life there, right?
yeah,
But as it was
yeah.
growing beyond what I could afford as someone who saw their future in, sadly, a profession that doesn't pay well on the front end.
Yep.
Now, don't get me wrong, my nonprofit brothers and sisters at Restoration, they was making six figures. Were
Yeah.
living out in Westchester or in
Yep.
Long Island. They were making
Yep.
money. So don't be fooled that
Yep.
there's no money in these professions, because there is. But when you start out, you gotta be scrappy.
And then the
Um,
thing is, like, being in the district, and people tell us, like, because that's the other thing about being in this region. There's that, not as it only is there that connectivity, and I think just the
mhm.
advantage. Now, I do see Maryland heating up, but it's
Oh
going to
yeah,
heat up differently. And this
definitely.
is the moment right now. And but then Baltimore's history was, let's make sure everybody has somewhere to live.
Yeah.
And because Baltimore's history was, let's make sure everybody has somewhere to live, there is a lot of housing. And there is a
Mhm.
lot of people just own it and they're converting it. And then, of course, there's that when they get rid of that Route 40 situation and they just rip that
Yes.
up, and then they could just play. Well, obviously, they do need to do some replacement housing. People deserve to get to come back there.
Yes.
But
And
there's still room to play with it if we can get
yes.
this IZ right.
There is so much at stake right there, and I
Mm-hmm.
live about a mile and a half away.
Yeah.
But when I lived on Pennsylvania Avenue, I worked. Well, I was a volunteer with Neighborhood Design Center, and they're
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
a historic,
Mm-hmm.
neighborhood-based, organization that brings together
Mm-hmm.
planners and
Mm-hmm.
architects and other urban
Yes,
design fields to do
another great
projects.
group I've worked with before.
Yeah, and I was fortunate to work with them while they were working with Bree Jones at Parody Homes.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
was working in Harlem Park, and I was
Yep.
walking there from Pennsylvania Avenue to where we
Yes.
were working at,
Mm.
and like the things I could write about. I'm like,
Yes.
it just all comes alive for you when you just really figure out, like when you see this history and you learn about old Central West Baltimore,
Mm-hmm.
and just feeling like just walking on the streets that, like,
Mm-hmm.
in New York it's the same way, right? Like it's that same, like, the people who have walked these streets, like you can feel
Mm-hmm.
the energy. But in
Yes.
Baltimore, it's a different thing, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's the same people probably, and
Yes.
other,
Yeah.
also very notable people have walked the streets of what is now dilapidated and dangerous and dark and broken, and it doesn't have to be that way. And
No,
I want,
no.
and that's the thing, like, so gentrification I don't think is our problem in Baltimore. Well, not in all the places, right? Like there are certain places that it is real, but it's acute. And another interning thing that I did was working with the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance,
Yes,
who
yes,
does
yes.
data and, research, to like takes the census data and, breaks it
Mm-hmm.
down for Baltimore, makes it digestible for like everyday people. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the most interesting facts that I'm really trying to boost and want people to really hear is the research found that, the neighborhoods that are more, that are overwhelmingly like 80% Black, or like majority Black neighborhoods, are losing residents,
Yeah.
while the neighborhoods in the city that are gaining residents, like the Cantons and the waterfront
Mm-hmm.
neighborhoods and the
Mm-hmm.
Riverside, all that, the reason they're growing residents in Black residents, they are growing because they're gaining Black residents. So like that's the kind of antidote to getting Black people to stay in cities, because right now with the 2020 census we also learned that the majority of the Black population is suburban now, right?
Yep.
Like the Black
Yep.
concentration in the cities, they're going out, but the Black
Yeah.
people who do want to live in cities want to live in integrated,
Mm-hmm.
wealthy, clean,
Mm-hmm.
safe neighborhoods.
Yes.
So like the gentrification thing's kind of flipped on its head, right? Like The ones who can afford it are moving to, quote unquote, better urban neighborhoods because they want to be in a vibrant, integrated place. So
yeah, the people who think that they can keep moving the goalposts further and further up,
right,
they're
right.
gonna get laughed out. And that's why I love that Urban Institute study that just came out. Like,
Hmm.
we need all the resources. Because here's the
Yep.
thing: get everybody with a voucher, get everybody housed,
Hmm.
and then people are gonna start wanting to move. Like those buildings on that waterfront, like,
Hmm.
let people make that choice, but let it be a choice. And then of course
Right.
everybody who's still, because I just think about the people whose stove exploded up there off of Reisterstown Road, like
Oh,
that
yes, yes.
that like there's so many folks that are waiting on getting free from their gas stoves, or they
Hmm.
want to make the updates. So really, I want to challenge as we wrap up, like, for one thing, this gentrification diary, it being the first one, this has been excellent. Like,
Yeah,
thank
that.
you for telling your story and coming and telling all the things, and of course talking about why each that's what I'm hoping to do with, of course, this version.
Mhm.
And of course I'll save some of my like end of story stuff for the next segment. But one of the things you kind of were alluding to it, like, kind of leave folks with advice, like if they're facing like the acute gentrification where they're getting ready to get evicted, or they're
Mhm.
like dealing with like a price mismatch, or somebody's trying to call the cops on their church, or like something like
Mhm.
that. What's your piece of advice you would give people who are dealing with gentrification acutely to properly define it, maybe even get closer to eradicating? Because of course here at this podcast we
Mhm.
believe everybody is wealthy, we believe everybody is worthy, everybody deserves
Yep.
a home that they love, and if they want to upgrade, they upgrade. So
Yep.
that's the premise. That's like the thought process of defining and
Mhm.
eradicating gentrification. So for those folks who feel like gentrification is like a foot stepping on them and they feel like they can't get out under it,
Mhm.
what do you say to those folks? What do you give them some advice? And of course, share some resources. You've already shared some
Mhm.
great resources, but also share a few more if you can.
So my best piece of advice is to go to every neighborhood meeting that you can. Go to every city planning meeting that you're able to attend as it relates to your neighborhood, because that's where the changes happen. And it doesn't take 10 people to do it. If you can get two of your neighbors with you to go, you know, challenge the permit for like the new liquor store that's going in town, or on your block or whatever, all that stuff has to be addressed at that city planning level when the meetings are happening. So like if you have to make time to do it, get time off of work if you have to, if it's something that pertains to your neighborhood where you live, like you have to make that time. And like I go to a lot of meetings and I'm usually the youngest person in there by a couple decades most of the
Yep.
time. And me and my neighbor, we go together at the same age, and we are trying to have seats at these tables because one, they want to. A lot of people are like, "Hey, do you want to take this seat?" Like they're kind of tired now. Like they're like, "We were making decisions. We want someone else to come and do it." And I was fortunate enough to meet our state senator, Antonio Hayes. He's my
Mm-hmm.
senator,
Yeah.
state senator. And the first thing when I met him when I was volunteering with Parity Homes and sitting at a table while we were doing a community outreach session, and he was there, and he was like, "Get involved with the neighborhood association. They need some
Yes.
young blood there."
Yes.
And I
Yes.
was like, well, that's great advice,
And
Senator.
let me put a pin in that. If you are in a neighborhood association and you won't let go to the young folks. It's
Hmm.
time. They will carry you. We want to carry you, but you got to let us carry you. So that's good advice. Anything
Yeah.
else?
No, but yeah, that read, be educated, join groups. I've been very fortunate to share partnership with so many great groups that I don't even like. Sometimes I'm like, can I even talk about this stuff? I know someone who knows like 10 times more than I do, but I'm humbled enough to carry on their words and their knowledge with me, and being able to share them and bring them alive in my conversations. So the more you know, the more you can share and just be a resource.
All right, y'all. So this conversation has been wonderful. Derek, you've been an awesome guest. And
Yeah,
so,
thank you for having me.
oh, you're welcome. And so, everybody else, hold up. I got one more ad break, and then I'll come back and wrap up the show. Once again, this is a Defying Gentrification podcast with Kristen Jeffers. So I have one more book for you in this episode that I would love for you to go to my bookshop.org/shops/Kristen Jeffers store and buy. Or you can also get the audiobook as well. So if you're enjoying hearing my voice, you may not know, but bookshop.org sells audiobooks for a lot of books, and this one is included in that. This book is called The Black Butterfly. It's by Lawrence T. Brown. Well, specifically The Black Butterfly, The Harmful Politics of Race and Space in America. So there are multiple books called The Black Butterfly, but I want to make sure you have the one that's focusing on Baltimore and the harmful politics of race and space in America, which are reflected in Baltimore. So just a little lesson here. We didn't exactly get very deep into this, but we alluded to this in our interview together. But the Black Butterfly is basically the black neighborhoods of Baltimore, the legacy historic black neighborhoods of Baltimore that make a butterfly shape when you look at them on a map. And so that shape is reflected on the cover. I've been following Lawrence T. Brown's Facebook group, and this man is very pointed in his criticisms of the city, and I was really excited to see that finally he had a book deal, and I'm also very excited to see who actually published it. A little shocked too. I'll let you find that out. If you go over to bookshop.org/shop/Kristen Jeffers, it is right there in the bookstore now under the Black Urbanist book list. And yeah, definitely read it and let me know what you think. I'm looking forward to getting deeper into it. Of course, the book is a lot of the things he shared in the Facebook page, but then it's even enhanced. So yes, this and many other books are there. And yeah, you can support me in the podcast by going to bookshop.org/shop/Kristen Jeffers. And now let's finish the show. So this conversation today really motivated me so much, and I'm so glad that Derek Moore was our first guest. Since we had our conversation, I've really been prioritizing visiting Baltimore more. Yes, we're looking to move up there in a little bit, but really, really seeking out places and spaces and neighborhoods I hadn't before, and I've been really, really pleased. Connecting with Black Arts District, connecting with City Lit, continuing to build my connections with my media colleagues, and hopefully soon becoming a full-time Baltimore resident. But anyway, thank you all for being here for this longer episode. Our guest episodes will be longer like this. And yeah, feel free to listen as much as you can, take pauses, whatever you need to do. But we love to have you, and we hope you'll continue to join us for these guest episodes as well as my solo shows. And yes, the Defying Gentrification podcast is a production of Kristen Jeffers Media. I'm your host, producer, guest booker, etc. You can find this podcast everywhere that podcasts are. You can subscribe to the newsletter. The newsletter lives on Substack. Just go on Substack and search for Defying Gentrification, Crafting Liberation. And that way you'll never miss one of my Monday live streams. Mondays at noon Eastern. So whatever that is in your time zone, I will be live on every one of my social medias. That's LinkedIn, that's Instagram, that's YouTube. And yeah, I'll be live and talking back about the episode and anything else that's on my mind. Anyway, I hope that you will do your best this week or whenever time period you listen to this to defy and eradicate gentrification. And I will see you next time.